Welcome to Divisive Issues, a spoiler-filled, foul-mouthed comic book podcast where we talk about controversial comic books. I'm Ryan.
I'm Sly.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Darryl. Or am I? That's a good question.
I don't have a face.
That's a less good seg.
Yeah, but so for this topic of this episode, we're going to be talking about the question. And if you don't know what the question is...
Wait, what question?
Who's on
Oh,
first?
Jesus. Here we go. This is going to be our highest brow episode yet.
Yeah. If you watched or read Watchmen...
Who watches The Watchmen? Hopefully, our listeners,
Yeah.
right, guys?
Or the people that watch the movie.
Or people watch our podcast because they're watchers, not listeners, according
Guys,
to me.
I hate this episode already.
This is very bad. This is very bad content.
Can you please form that in a phrase of like a question?
I hate this episode already.
So, Rorschach from The Watchmen was actually originally the question. And who is the question, you may ask? So, to get to the question, the character, not the
We're
actual...
going to talk about the Watchmen stuff in further detail.
Yeah, in further detail later on, as it gets relevant. But first we'll talk about the question, the character, not the actual concept of a question.
Yeah, we can just refer to him as Vic Sage.
Vic Sage, Secret Identity of Vic Sage. So, Vic Sage was created by Steve Ditko. And you might not know who he is, but he is probably easily one of the top 5 most important comic book creators of all time. He co-created Spider-Man, he co-created Doctor Strange.
And more famously, the Blue Beetle.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm assuming you guys know who Spider-Man is. He's kind of an obscure character, but...
I know Blue Beetle, I don't know Spider-Man.
Yeah, but so Steve Ditko is really well known in the comic community. He might not be mainstream like Stan Lee, but like if you know anything about comics, you know Steve Ditko because like so many writers, including Alan Moore, with Watchmen, paid homage to Steve Ditko because they love his work.
Well, one of the reasons why Steve Ditko doesn't get talked about like to the level that like Stan Lee or Jack Kirby does is because he like disappeared. He did like a J.D. Salinger and was like, I don't want to deal with anyone ever again. I'm just gonna go hide.
Well, he said I want my fans to love my work and not me. Like, so I'm just gonna.
So I'm gonna be an asshole.
He is kind of an asshole, but I always kind of respect that. Maybe because I'm an asshole myself. I'd rather my
fellow asshole.
I'd rather my fans know my work than like have my personality reflect on how they view my work. But
Which is why you're on a comic book podcast.
It's too late for that now.
Yeah.
But
Don't think about my personality.
but my toxic fucking
Well, I
problematic
will
personality.
admit that your work is much better than your personality.
Oh god, my work is terrible. But Steve Ditko, the important thing you have to know about Steve Ditko is he is a huge Ayn Rand objectivist libertarian, and that's what he loves writing. Even when he wrote Spider-Man, the way he would the Marvel method of doing comics was Stan Lee will have the basic outline, and basically Steve Ditko will do the actual layouts and basically the plot pacing, and Stan Lee will then write in the dialogue afterwards. And he will write in the scenes where like Spider-Man will yell at some protesters saying, "Get a job, you fucking hippies!"
Oh yeah, he was that guy.
Yeah, and but then Stan Lee later on would write it saying, "Good job, kids, keep up the good work, fight the power," and stuff like that. Because Stan Lee was a big liberal, and that's kind of probably why the two of them like split after like 25 issues. And DC had the same thing because DC and Marvel he had issues with editorial, so he often worked with a company called Charleston Comics, where he did his own creative individual stuff, and that's where he created the question.
Yes.
Who is the question, Ryan?
So, first, we're going to talk about his first appearance in Blue Beetle #1, which came out in 1967. And
The famous issue.
famous issue. Hey, I have it. No, Joe has it. I have the first Blue Beetle. That's not important.
And you have Joe.
I have Joe. So, the question is Vic Sage. He's a TV anchor and reporter. And this issue is both written and drawn by Steve Ditko.
Yep.
And like Sly said, it's Charleston Comics, which DC eventually bought, but at the time they were like an indie comic company.
Yeah.
And it opens with them setting up the TV network that Vic Sage works for, and they what?
Can I just say real
Sure.
quick before we begin that this comic has the most bizarre lettering I've read since I joined the podcast.
It is really
Everything's real blocky and it's like evenly spaced. It doesn't look nearly as good as other comic book fonts.
It's
in
like
formatting.
typewriter, kind of like typewriter-esque in
Yeah.
a weird way.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't like look good to read.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, lettering is one of those things you never think about, but it took a while for it to be like universally perfected. Like there's a lot of, even by the 2000s, there's different lettering styles that I find weird in comparison. Like in the 2000s, they did like all lowercase lettering, like it was a actual like a book or something like that, and I always found that weird. I like the all uppercase small font lettering, but here's probably the weirdest one, and it makes sense because it's the 60s and a small indie comic. An indie publishing comic.
Yeah, so they don't know who to refer to, and they're just like, let's do this. This works fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I think lettering is one of those things that, like, generally, if you notice it, it's either extra good or extra bad.
Yeah.
Like, it's something that most people don't notice.
I've never thought about it in reading a comic.
I never thought about comics because I don't like them.
I usually think about when people do like really creative stuff with when different people speak that they get different lettering or colors.
Yeah, and
that's usually when it sticks out.
That didn't really happen until, like, the 80s.
Yeah, when the 80s is when we really started playing around with that stuff. But so what happens with Vic Sage?
Oh, and before we get further into it, what do you guys think about Ditko's art?
This is okay. I'd have to read more comics from this time because it's like it's not all art from this era blends together for me.
I feel the same way. I really, it feels so generic to me, but maybe it's unfair. I don't know.
Yeah, we're also not reading like other artists back to back from the 60s.
No, but even when I compare this to like old, I guess no, actually old X-Men did look better than this.
But that's still a decade later.
Yeah, it's still
your definition of old X-Men is still late 70s.
And also, you're not comparing to DC. One thing Steve Ditko's art was really different from DC was it's very dynamic. Like DC is very, very static compared to what will later be Marvel style. But
Ditko is somebody that I didn't super appreciate until later.
It's funny you guys feel that way because of the industry in general felt that way after a while because in New York Times wrote about Steve Ditko and they said in the 80s and by the 80s he became a kind of a has-been in the industry because you had all these new artists come up and it's funny because he's such a libertarian. They point out that he's such a libertarian, objectivist, capitalist, working for the man, whatever the fuck. By the way, we should explain libertarianism, but first, let me finish this anecdote. Basically, what happened was he was so pushed out of the industry that he started drawing coloring books for Transformers and stuff like that. And the New York Times compared it to Orson Welles doing commercials for peas and stuff like that.
Wow, no wonder why he wanted to separate himself from his work.
Yeah,
because people are making fun of him. Now they're like pointing out how low he's sunk to. Sorry, Transformers fans.
So wait, we should, instead of defining what objectivism is, why don't we let his work speak for itself?
Okay.
Sly.
Yeah, it's probably better.
And then see if the question can explain to us what he feels.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so it opens with Vic Sage's boss, who is the president. Oh, no, this is his boss's son, actually, the PR guy at his TV station. And he says, "We at WWB-TV are not mere dispensers of entertainment. We are the defenders of truth and justice, the all-seeing eye, laying bare before the public every form of injustice, whatever the risk, whatever the price." And this kind of immediately establishes how heavy-handed this is going to be.
Yep.
And then it cuts to police officers busting up a gambling ring, and there's a mysterious figure in like a trench coat that's like, "I have to protect my reputation. You have to protect me." And he's talking to Lou Dicer, who's the mob boss. And as they're getting away, they kill a cop, and Lou Dicer is ID'd by witnesses. So even though they get away, Vic Sage announces that the hunt continues, and as usual, you, the enraged public, wonder how a leech like Lou Dicer and his ilk thrives so readily among you. How many of you willingly support his operation? How many of you frequent his tables or play numbers? You don't need their kind, they need you. Only you can keep them in business. Part of the responsibility lies with you. You are willing partners in Dicer's crime.
And it just kind of pisses off everyone.
Yeah, the public is like, I don't like being told
he
that
can't talk to us like that.
Yeah. And Lou Dicer's watching it, and he's like, "We gotta get him." And his boss is standing up for him, who they call him a bleeding heart, which I don't know what.
He's something like the New York Times. He's like, "I gotta hire a fucking climate change denier on my staff to seem impartial."
Yeah, but I've never seen a definition of bleeding heart be like, "He thinks everyone is scum."
Yeah.
But it's the idea that he cares about everybody instead of like he's turning a blind eye to
that's true,
crime. It's like he cares that people are getting murdered.
Yeah. And like the PR guy, like his son, and the whole staff is complaining like, "We have to stay neutral. We just have to report the facts. We can't take a side like this." And the boss is like, no, he's a good reporter. He does good work. We will let him tell the story how he wants to tell it. And then Vic openly threatens Lou Dicer, and he's like, I'll see you in prison. And then it cuts to the jail where all of Lou Dicer's goons have gotten bailed out, and Vic follows them, but as the Question, his superhero identity, where he has this... Yeah,
I really feel like this is such a stupid superhero. Like, I mean, I kind of liked the comic over, like these comics overall, but like his power or his
he doesn't have a power. He's a vigilante.
What he does. He puts on aftershave, then he puts on a mask.
But is that the only thing you find stupid about it? Just the different way he puts on his costume?
It's just to put, like, he's just a guy with a mask, but the mask is just a blank face.
I understand where you're coming from, because the putting on the mask is stupid, but the concept of a man with no face, I find to be completely badass. I find it cooler than
so let's just explain this real quick. So he puts on a mask that looks like he has no face, and he releases a chemical, and like it's a gas, and the chemical changes the color of his hair, changes the color of his clothes, and makes the mask face stick to him. So he basically, like, he uses his chemical to have a disguise. He doesn't have any superpowers or anything. Mm-hmm. So I'm on Sly's side. I think the no face is cool.
I can see why Phil finds it stupid, and it is overly explaining a concept, like why he puts on his face mask, but I think it is to explain why he doesn't just look like Vic Sage without a face, and why his face doesn't just peel off in the middle of combat.
Okay, I guess you have to explain it, or else that would be the question.
Yeah.
And especially in 1967, this is probably the most grounded character.
It just, every time he goes into, like, combat and he takes off this little, like, play-doh off his belt, and it's like, time to put on my aftershave and put on my face. My no-face face.
Well, yeah, anytime you subtract the mystery from, like, a superhero, they become a lot more grounded, and in this case, it does look pretty dumb. But I do have, like, kind of soft for something like Rorschach. Or in Sly's comic, the Smoke Man, the titular Smoke Man, has no face. And it's like, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, not to plug my shitty book, but you notice
it's great, much better than you.
But there is a lot of similarities between the Smoke Man and my character, because just the imagery of the Question covered in smoke. Even like it's dumb that he has to go through smoke and make his face melt on his face.
But like in your defense, a smoky figure in an alleyway is like all of noir, so like it's fine.
I like Smoke Man more than the Question.
Also, and. Like Sly's character, you don't really get into like the specifics. Like, you don't see him walking around and putting on, like, he kind of just appears in the smoke.
Yeah, imagine
like
he took out a little can and was like, now I will smoke up the alley.
Yeah, it's a lot less romantic. It's like, it's cool that this happens, but seeing it happen, you're like, oh, you're just like a news reporter that puts on this little piece of fabric over his face.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. So
anyway,
then he follows the goons to their base, their headquarters, I guess. And I find this kind of weird. He gives them his calling card first.
This.
So and they're like, "What is this index card?" And then a question appears, and then he jumps in and beats them all up.
Well, the guy shows off, his calling card. That's the cool thing to do.
I thought
except you leave a calling card at the end, don't you?
Yeah.
Most calling cards are stupid. Like, if you look at any calling card in like the Daredevil movie and the Punisher movie, where they set stuff on fire, hoping somebody will light this stuff on fire. And
the best calling card is the Wet Bandits from Home Alone.
What do?
They leave the faucets on.
Well, maybe this is more like a business card. He's like, hey, nice to meet you. I'm the Question.
Oh yeah, probably.
Yep. And you're about to get your clock cleaned.
Well, he's like a capitalist. You got to have your business card.
Yeah,
that's true.
So he beats them up, and he threatens them if they don't give up their boss. And I think, especially for 67, I think this is a lot more violent than usual. And like he really beats them up. And then
like, you compare this like Superman. Superman would just punch him once, and it would just be like one shot of Superman punch somebody, and say "pow."
Yeah,
shot,
exactly.
And that's it.
And this is definitely more like, even though it's still bright and colorful.
Well, technically, Superman can knock them out in one hit.
But like, if you like Batman, you'd be like, "Pow, suck." Zim.
Batman's trained in martial arts so that he can neutralize any target in one hit.
Fuck you, Darryl.
Either way, I think that the violence depicted here is ahead of 1967. And he finds out where Lou Dicer is, and he follows him to his meeting with his mysterious partner. He calls the cops, and they arrest them, and it turns out that this mysterious partner is it's Jim Lark, a guy we don't know.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck is this?
That's the best kind of mystery. The mystery that you find out somebody you don't know.
Yeah, well, that was actually... I'm not going to get into the whole Green Goblin thing. You could look up what Ditko wanted Green Goblin to be later if you want.
Ditko had a thing for making it the person to be somebody you don't know, and Stanley's like, I want it to be somebody we know. Green Goblin is fucking Norman Osborn. Fuck you, Steve Ditko.
Yeah. And Jim Lark, they reveal... They're like, it's Jim Lark from the TV station. And Vic tapes it for his newscast. And this is actually my favorite part of the issue. The rest of the media, the rest of the TV station wants to silence him and kill the story because they're like, he's one of ours. We got to look out for our fellow newsman. He's going to make us look bad. And the boss says, no, it's Vic's story. He can run it. And
yeah, I really like that they say that they like, hey, why don't we just post this as a bulletin that's like, oh, he works for our news station.
Yeah, and I do really like that argument of like, they're trying to look out for each other instead of telling the news like it is.
It's actually the most interesting part of the comic. Because in the beginning, they come out and say like, we'll give you the news no matter what it is. And then later on, they're like, we should probably not tell them that this guy worked for our station.
Yeah. And even though this is like such an interesting thing that the news story is doing, the audience is either asleep, not paying attention, or gambling.
Yeah.
So what's the point? And that's the end of the questions first story.
So
you really do see the Rorschach roots in this character.
Yeah.
Like the world is scum, and I do my best to try to save it, but really people are shit.
But if you want to get into more Rorschachiness,
man,
this one was way too over the top.
We're going to Mr. A. So this was created for Witzend, a super small indie comic, and basically Mr. A was the answer to the question, like, what do we do with crime? We fucking stomp it out. No mercy for fucking criminals. And this is where the weird Rorschach comes in.
Yeah, so at the time, you couldn't really publish mainstream comic books without a stamp from the Comics Code, which like limited a lot of what you could do. If you're more interested, check out the episode of Comrade Radio that I did with Malcolm like months ago.
This is just a plugging episode, like that's all we're gonna do.
Yeah, but basically he published Mr. A separately, as he's saying like, the question is the Comics Code version of Mr. A.
Yeah.
So Mr. A's first appearance is also in 1967, and what is it? It's like it's something. Witzend number 3 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah. So it opens with this long monologue that basically says there's no black and white. There's
there is black and white only.
Yeah.
No, yeah, sorry. He says, if there is no black and white, then and there's only shades of gray, where does the gray come from? Isn't gray a mixture of black and white? So therefore there must be objective good and evil, and therefore anything evil you do is an evil action that you should be punished.
There's no justification for choosing any part of evil, it says.
Yeah, I just love how like you don't like even if this is your message or your theme, like show it in the story rather than just be like just starting off, just let you guys know there's no such thing as grays. There is good and evil's good. It's like, do you really need to have this kind of introduction?
In Ditko's defense, though, I don't think there were any comics at this time that would ever even touch this.
Yeah, and also he had four pages to tell the story, so I think he wanted to get the message.
And it was actually, okay.
Yeah. So the first question story was what, like 12, 13 pages?
Yeah.
And this is 5 pages. So it opens with Angel, who's this
I love the irony.
Yeah. He's a punk kid, and him and his friend are like robbing a store or like burglaring a store, and these cops see them, and Angel bashes a cop's head in with a pipe. And
kills him.
And this one and the last issue, the first question we just talked about, I couldn't tell that they killed cops because I guess they didn't want to show too much violence against them. Yeah. But it's like he's standing there and they're like, "Oh my god, what'd you do?" And then it's like later they're like, "He killed the cop," but it doesn't like.
It does. It usually comics at this time they would throw somebody off a building and they would land in a dumpster or something.
Right.
Like
right.
So this is by not explaining it, the implication is pretty.
Is they're dead? Okay.
Yeah. So. The other cop, his partner, is like crying over his dead body, and the friend is really distraught, and he's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you did that! Like, we didn't have to do that." And then it cuts to the police station where the cops are like, "We have to bring in Angel," and the parents are like, "No, he would never do this. He's a great guy." And the like gruff fat dad is like, "You cops can't catch real criminals, so you're scapegoating kids and chasing after them instead." And then there's this bleeding heart liberal guy that is he's preaching like at this
Yeah, I
table
think it's a
that's-
reverend.
Is he a reverend?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, he's got the white collar.
It's like a community
Oh,
center
okay.
thing.
I didn't notice the
It's a
collar.
welfare center.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a welfare
being
center.
very direct.
Scum.
And he says, "Have faith, question no one," and like, no, all authority is good, and it's really on the nose.
Yeah, it's
And
the
he's like-
environment. It's responsible for criminals. We should
yeah, I
spend
love
what
that.
we need to build playgrounds, churches, parks, recreation centers. Yes, a clean environment.
And then some guy walking past goes, "It's not the environment. It's based on their thoughts. He should follow his head and do what he knows is right instead of his feelings or his heart, and just be a good guy."
I thought that guy was going to be Mr. A at the end of
Yeah,
this.
so did I. And did I even say who Mr. A is?
I don't think they ever
No.
reveals
Yeah.
anything.
It's definitely that guy.
So then it cuts to a pawn shop where Angel's friend is there and he's really scared. But the pawn shop is like, "I'm not turning anyone in unless the cops have proof." And because like he says like to the cops like, "I'm just a businessman. You can't do anything," and like shoves him out of his store.
Yeah, and they know that Angel was selling them the jewels.
Yeah. And then Mr. A shows up with an even worse calling card, which he hands out first, and it's just a card that's half black and half white.
Oh man,
But the thing that I really like about the scene is the pawn guy, the pawn broker.
it's not even. Why didn't he have like an A? At least question had a question mark that would appear.
Yeah.
Or I go the opposite. Why couldn't he make his mask like half black and half white and be like half the black and white man or something like that?
Because he's all white. Because he's only
He's
good.
all white.
Oh, yeah, he's only white. He should be white man. That wouldn't be any question.
That'll go over well. White power man.
Yeah.
I mean, this was what, the 67? That'd be-
Yes.
At the time, Marvel did have a character named Power Man who was white, so.
Close
So
enough.
I really like the scene where the pawnbroker is like, "You can't come in here," and Mr. H slaps him across the
He
face. Like,
backhands him.
he backhands him.
And he's saying, "It's Mr. A."
And he really beats everyone up. Like, this is even more violent than the question stuff. And the friend escapes to warn Angel. And this is...
I love this scene.
This takes such a turn.
It's so dark.
He bursts into Angel's house, and it's still in, like, the 60s style art.
Yeah.
It says, meanwhile, in an empty building, and then there's like some teacher there to see.
Oh, I thought it was
Angel.
his mom.
I
No,
know,
his
he's
mom
not
was the one that
his
was like
kinder.
who was a fat woman in the beginning.
Oh,
It's like
okay.
his teacher trying to be like, "I know you couldn't have done it," like, and he's like, "No, I couldn't have. It wasn't me. I didn't kill the cop. Nobody believes me."
Yeah,
She's
starts
like,
crying crocodile tears.
and
Yeah.
like praying, and
So-
yeah.
So the friend bursts in, and he's like, "The cops are onto you. They know you killed that cop." And he flips out and just runs up and stabs the friend in the gut.
Yeah. Oh my god. He just pulls out this knife. It's in him, and the teacher's watching this kid murder the other
The
one.
teacher's
And
like,
she's
"Oh
like,
my
she's
God."
before she's like, "Angel, you're such a sweet soul. How can you do this? Like, what is this madness happening?"
And so he grabs the teacher, runs to the roof, and then when Mr. A sees them and he's like chasing after them, he stabs the teacher too,
Yeah.
and like throws her on the ground. Mr. A punches him. He falls off the building, and then he has
But he
to
grabs
make
onto like a pole
like a
that holds up
flagpole,
a
yeah.
flagpole.
So he's hanging onto a flagpole, and she's bleeding out on the ground. And Mr. A is like, "You choose. I only have time to save one of you, but I do have time to give you this speech. Should I
this.
save you?
Well, he's
or
just fucking
him?"
proving a point here. He doesn't give a shit if
Yeah,
he lives or dies.
well,
He's
which
just
is
like,
it's just the reveal at the end. But he's like, "Should I choose you or him?" And she's like, "I can't make that choice." And he's like, you want me to choose you, but you're ashamed to admit
yeah, you're a
it."
coward. You don't want to say to let him die.
Yeah, and then he's like, "Who should make that choice for you? Who should decide if you live or die? Everyone but you?"
Yeah,
She's like,
he says like you'd rather die than admit that your life is more important than the life of a killer.
and then she's like, "You're so cold. You're so mean." He's like, "I don't abuse my emotions. I have
Yeah,
no
it's a good
mercy
retort.
or compassion for aggressors, only for their victims, for the innocent. To have any sympathy for the killer is an insult to their victims. Even if you weren't hurt, I wouldn't have saved Angel." And he carries her to the hospital very slowly as Angel falls to his death.
Yeah, I love as he's giving the speech. He's like, "I wouldn't have saved him anyway." You just see
And that's why I love that he gives the speech, because I was like, "You have time to do both," and then it's like, no, he doesn't give a fuck at all. He doesn't want to do both.
he just wants her to have to he wants her to have to say save me over that piece of shit.
Yeah. Well, because like probably the idea is that Steve Ditko believes everyone deep down believes in objective morality, but we're boggled by this liberal bullshit, hippie bullshit that we have to try to save everyone. They're all products of our environment. But
so Sly, I've heard you make the argument that Mr. A makes before, though, where you're like, just fucking let the Joker die and stuff like that.
The Joker is a different case entirely.
It's easy to make objectivist
arguments
when it's dealing with like these ridiculous comic book characters like the Joker, who's killed millions of people.
A better question would have been like in the Mr. A comic uses Angel, who's so like flagrantly awful. He's such a terrible person.
He laughs about killing a cop.
What about his friend? Did he deserve to die and get stabbed because he was helping him because he was just afraid of getting caught? It's like that's more of a nuanced position.
That's the thing that I was confused by his point that Ditko's trying to make, because he's saying there's no gray. It's just black and white. But then like the friend is painted like sympathetic because he's like he's burgling somebody. But
you're mistaking cowardice for sympathy, right?
Yeah, he's just a pussy who's too afraid to turn on.
Yeah, he's a beta.
Yeah, he's just a cuck. That teacher was his girlfriend, and he was setting up some sex.
So I think you can get the idea of what objective morality is a little bit, and like this is when I say libertarian applies to libertarians, because a lot of libertarians believe like the market is like laissez-faire is the best market, and it's only just corrupt pieces of shit that fuck it up. And if we all get rid of all the bad people and have all the good people, everything will be perfect. Like the only bad actors are like and like. It's funny. It's kind of ironic to me because the market ended up fucking him over in the 80s, which is funny.
Maybe he was like, "This is my fate. This is what I deserve."
Yeah, I'm evil now.
I am the black side of Mr. A's calling card.
So what happened after this is Charleston Comics went out of business. And
in the 80s, DC bought up like every indie publisher. That's how they got the rights to Shazam and Captain Marvel, the same character, The Question, Blue Beetle, and Plastic Man. Like they bought up a lot of comic.
And what happened was Steve Ditko created a lot of characters: Captain Atom, The Question, and Blue Beetle for Charleston Comics, and all those characters went to DC. And DC's like, we should use this property for something. And Alan Moore said, I want to use this property. I want to make a book called Watchmen. And DC's like, this concept is great, but if we spent all that money to get these properties, and now we're going to just basically kill it immediately with this premise, because you can't really follow up on Watchmen with the same characters again. And so DC decided, so let's rename the characters. Captain Atom became Dr. Manhattan, Blue Beetle became Night Owl, and The Question became Rorschach.
Yeah.
And what happened was Daniel Neal, who is a writer we talked about briefly a few times. He did Superman versus Muhammad Ali, and he did
the Jon Stewart Green Lantern issue.
Yes, and he's a big liberal, but like me, he found the premise of The Question really cool. But he said, like, I can't, and this is according to a source, a Divisive issue source. Go to novelgraphics.com and you'll see Joe's interview with Daniel Neal where he says this. Plug for our site, plug number 3 for us.
That's Novel Graphics with a hyphen.
Yeah. So Joe interviewed Daniel Neal, and Daniel Neal said like he really loved The Question, but he couldn't write a character with those politics, the objective, the objective morality politics.
He also said his Question book was his favorite thing he's written.
Yeah. So he basically did this thing where he decided I'm going to take his character and deconstruct him and make him a big fucking liberal. And that's what we're getting to for issue 1 of Daniel Neal's Question.
Okay, wait. Before you get to this, I just want to... I know we don't do recommendations anymore, but this idea of, like, reinventing the characters and stuff, if you find anything about these Charlton characters really interesting, I highly recommend you read the Multiversity issue that Grant Morrison wrote. It's called, like, Multiversity Charlton Comics or something.
I would recommend Multiversity if you want to see, like, an inverse Watchmen. Like, what if Watchmen went right?
Yeah, and it's a 1 issue, it's standalone, and it's basically, like... reconstructing Watchmen with the Charlton characters. It's really hard to explain, but it's kind of exactly what we're talking about and done in a super, super cool way.
Like, for example, like in Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan has like no compassion for human beings because they're all just atom and matter or whatever, all that shit. In that story, one of the big things is there is a Captain Atom, the Charleston equivalent. He actually does find value in life and feels remorse when things die. So it's a huge difference from...
Yeah. But let's look at another reinvention.
Yeah, so issue 1 of The Question, 1986. It opens with...
it's written by Dennis O'Neil, drawn by Dennis Cohen.
Yeah, what do you think of Dennis Cohen's art, by the way?
I find it hit or miss based on issues. There's some issues that I really like him in. I like him a lot in these issues. But there's some that I'm just like, wow, this looks bad.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Darryl, Phil?
Boring.
Boring?
I don't. It feels like a prelude to all the '90s art, like all the Rob Liefeld.
It is in a lot of ways.
Todd McFarlane stuff, where it's like really gruff, excessively shaded guys, or
everyone is
wrinkles.
So buff.
I like it. I like it more than '90s stuff, just because
I agree.
It has a dark tone to it. I think that this book needs, but it is not my favorite art by any means.
Yeah.
He's
but
like,
it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad enough to take me out of it.
He's a good artist. Like, he knows human anatomy. It's just not. I don't know.
I would compare it as a less refined version of the art from our Swamp Thing episode.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
All right, so
Phil
Victor
approves.
Yes.
I'm like, I'll accept. We can continue this podcast.
Yeah. Now that Phil, the master, has approved, we can continue. But so the story has narration as Vic Sage is getting ready to beat up a bunch of thugs in a building, and it says narration that he will die in 25 hours. And he bursts into a shack looking for a tape, and as Vic Sage's broadcast is about to start, and basically a woman is standing there, an Asian woman, and she just watches him as she beats the shit of all the other guys in the room. And she says when Vic asks if she's gonna get involved, she's like, "I hate violence," and she lets Vic get the tape from them. And so Vic Sage gets away from the cops, and he mails his time to ad-lib his broadcast. And
he gets there like 30 seconds before they're about to go on the air.
I mentioned to our Facebook chat that I was like, "Hey, this guy is an asshole. Like, I don't like him that much," because he comes there, and then another person was like, "Mr. Sage, your script," and he says, "I'll ad-lib," and she says, "Your makeup," and he's like, "I'm beautiful just the way I am." This is after
I loved that.
Sped away from the cops. It's like, this guy's just, man, this is not...
Darryl said this guy is who he imagines I imagine myself to be.
I thought he was pretty cool. I was like, he doesn't give a fuck.
The Question is one of my favorite fucking characters of all time, but we'll get into why.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. He is one of my favorites, but because of when he gets reinvented, he's a piece of shit right now.
Yeah. So the tape is about the school commissioner doing cocaine while awarding contracts to a friend. And Vic Sage is like, "Oh, it's the mayor's too lazy or too stupid or too corrupt to fix this." And like the 1960s Vic Sage. And it turns out the mayor is useless, just a puppet, and the real man in charge is this priest. And this very shady priest. And
he always says lamentably, which I like. I like when people have like a verbal tick they focus on.
And this is something that doesn't seem like a big deal now, but back then in the 80s, having a priest as a villain was a big fucking deal. And so he hired. She's like he was the one that hired out the Asian woman, who's Lady Shiva. And he's mad at her because she didn't beat up Vic Sage, but she's like, "I do what I want, like, fuck you."
She says, like, "You paid me for some job, we don't know what, but you didn't pay me to protect some tape, and you didn't pay me to beat up the Question."
Yeah,
right. She's a really practical mercenary, just like she should be.
Yeah, you didn't pay me to nurture the inept. I like that line.
Yes.
So Mira, Vic Sage's girlfriend, they're in bed together. She asks Vic to take it easy. And he refuses, and he goes to see Todd.
Wait, I have to... This is when I was like, this guy doesn't give a shit. Because first, this is the scene of events. He drives and beats up all these people at the beginning to get a tape so that he can go on the news and be like, "Yeah, I found this thing. Everyone's assholes. Fuck them." then he goes... He bangs his girlfriend, and she's like, "Oh my god, your hand's bleeding." And I didn't realize. He's like, "Yeah, I was fucking you too hard for you to notice." Haha. And then,
I mean, he does. He's like, "You were too busy to notice last night." And
I was like, this guy's awesome. He just doesn't give a shit. And he's like, "See ya." And then
I can't believe I was wrong. This is who Phil wanted to be.
But so he goes to see Todd, the guy who made the mask. And
he's like this old guy who just quotes Aristotle all the time, and he's great.
Yeah, and everyone's psychoanalyzing him, like they're talking about his because he was an orphan, and Mira's like, "Oh, it's because you're an orphan that you have all this aggression." And he's like, "Fuck you, I don't give a fuck."
No, she doesn't even bring that up. He says that about himself. He's like, "I know it's something about like you're going to say it's an inferiority complex since I was an orphan." I don't believe it.
Yeah, he's like, I don't give a shit.
And then and Tot is like, Tot's like, oh, you started smoking now? Is it because of your stress at work? And he's like, I don't need you to psychoanalyze me. I do what I want.
And he puts out the cigarette on this guy's floor.
How do you not like this?
The more you guys are talking about it, the more he's awesome.
Yeah, he is.
When I read the Blue Beetle one, I was like, this guy's kind of boring. And then this issue, I was like, this guy has changed.
I was rooting for Shiva this whole episode.
So Vic goes to pay a bum for information, and the bum used to be a reporter till his family got killed.
Oh, even before that, when he's with Tot, he's like, there's a problem with my mask. And Tot's like, oh, I think the nicotine is affecting your chemicals. And he's like, too bad, I'm going to keep smoking. Deal with it.
Yeah. And so, but cop goes to hassle the bum, and Vic says, like, leave that fucking guy alone. He's a fucking good guy.
He was a reporter.
He actually fucking grabs the cop and puts him in like an arm bar.
Yeah.
Or I couldn't believe like it's just so.
He does what he wants.
Yeah. Well, he says like, this guy was a great reporter and he did a lot of great work. And then some punk broke in and killed his whole family. Like, you would turn to the sauce too if that happened to you.
See, he's not completely an asshole. He understands why people do this kind of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cop that Vic Sage is hassling, he gets shot by the tape guy who was trying to kill Vic. And what joke does he make, Ryan?
So the cop gets killed, and then he goes and he chases him down. He beats up the guy that tried to kill him, and then he brings him back. And he's like, just another concerned citizen doing your job for you, to a bunch of other cops. And then the cop's like, if you're so smart, why didn't you join the force?
Oh my god.
And he goes, they wouldn't let me. I passed the IQ test. And like, a guy just got killed.
He says, read this loser your rights if you know how to read.
But the cop just got killed.
I know. He really has a disdain for cops.
One thing that gets established throughout the series is that Hub City, the city he's in, is like the most corrupt place in the world.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Like,
isn't like every fucking comic city like this?
No, this like Hub City is the worst.
Yeah, like there's no competition. Like, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But Hub City is the fucking worst city that could ever be written in any comic ever. Like, if you thought Gotham,
it's my favorite comic book city.
Yeah. But, the puppet master, Reverend guy, he makes a scary tape about a sermon about Nam, and he basically talks about how...
He's like a televangelist, apparently.
Yeah, and he basically talks about how in Nam he saw, like, all the death and destruction, and he realizes there is no God on this planet, and he has to make God come to this world. So he wants to basically accelerate the Armageddon. So he's basically accelerationist, so, vote Trump and all that shit. And so...
Well, he doesn't say that in this one, does he?
No, he doesn't say that in the tape.
He's thinking it.
Yeah.
He's like, I realize that man cannot serve two masters. And I guess you're supposed to think he would serve God, but in his flashback he throws his cross.
Down,
yeah.
Which was cool, I thought.
So Shiva sets up a trap. It turns out the bum betrayed Vic and gave him bad information.
No, I think that he tricks the bum to giving him.
He tricks the bum. Oh yeah, he does. But
Shiva sends some guy to set up a trap.
But the bum did betray Vic. But so Shiva.
That's what happens when you trust bums that give them money.
Yeah, they're all scum.
Lead you into an ambush.
Yeah. Shiva. So basically, Shiva walks up to Vic.
Vic's like, I know it's a trap. I'm gonna go anyway and go die.
That's the question.
And Shiva's the first one waiting for them, and she's just like, "You should leave." And she's just like, "Oh, I don't want to fight a woman." And then she just fucking murders him, basically.
For what it's worth, at this point, nobody knows that Vic is the question. They're just like, "Oh, he sent the question instead, we'll send him a message."
Yeah.
By killing the question.
And so after Shiva just fucking destroys Vic Sage, the goons basically beat the shit out of a pipe, and then they shoot him in the head of an air gun.
The thing that I really like about the scene is they're punching him and hitting him with a pipe, and they basically copy and paste the same panel like 3 or 4 times, but not like in a row. So it's like punch, bloody Vic, pipe, bloody Vic, punch, pipe. So it's like it gives.
Also, they zoom in every other one to like emphasize the impact.
Yeah, so it's like it's not just like pipe, but you get the illusion that you get the impression that they're just like beating him.
It's really brutal. It's all like headshots with a fucking pipe.
Yeah, like if this was not a comic book, this guy would be dead.
Like dead 1,000 times.
Yeah. So then they shoot him in the head of an air gun, and they dump him in the river, and they say something. And I think they say like something about him coming back and singing "Danny Boy," I believe.
Yeah, they're like the Reverend makes some joke about how like, oh, when you come back, you could sing Danny Boy because like
if this guy comes back after this, he'll be singing Danny Boy.
Yeah. And they also point out that the bullet went through the back of his skull, which is surprising.
Yeah. So now issue 2.
All right. So issue 2, Vic is dead. That's how it starts out.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay,
end of comic.
Yeah. And he's basically they have this whole like narration part about like what is time when you're dead. There's no such thing as change. Life has changed. Death is not. So was he dead for a moment or an eternity? Who knows? And he's moving towards this white light that's actually Myra's face, his girlfriend. Then he sees his own face, and then he wakes up with Tot, the guy from before, who I think his name is Aristotle, right?
Yeah.
It might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Aristotle something.
Yeah.
Rodor,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Hodor.
And he wakes up with Aristotle or Tot, and he's like, he couldn't remember who this guy is. And
His memory's way gone.
He does remember getting the shit beat out of him until he died, though.
Yeah.
So he's like, it's no way that I survived this. I was under for 10 minutes, and they're like, well, that happens sometimes. Your brain in cold water, you can survive.
Yeah, he references like diving reflex where your body will shut down and send only oxygen to the brain to try and save that above all the other organs.
Yeah, which does happen.
Yeah, he says like it's really rare, so like don't try this next time you go to the beach.
Yeah, it's a Superman thing. The next time you die, you might not come back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a fuck you to future writers. Don't use that.
Well, I also like also don't, it's not a good idea to do that in general for people reading this.
And then he's like, well, I got shot in the head. And they're like, well, you're wearing a mask, so the bullet didn't pierce your skull. It actually, like, bounced off.
It flattened off his head, and then it went around between bone and flesh and exited the rear.
So it, scraped against his skull instead of penetrating and came out the back.
Which, again, that can happen. That does happen.
And they do reference earlier in issue 1, like, they're using these air guns because they're quiet. Right. They're not as strong, but,
You can shoot someone in the head with it and kill them, but you don't have the cops running.
But there is an element of, like, magic healing in here. For sure.
Yeah. So then we cut to the Reverend and the mayor. The mayor's getting drunk, and the Reverend's like, well, Vic Sage must have been the question, because Vic Sage has been missing for weeks. And we threw the question in the river, so I can put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
And then Batman shows up.
Literally,
I was like, what the fuck?
They also reveal that Shiva helped heal him when she brought him and gave him, like, some notes, but they're all in Mandarin, so nobody can read it.
Well, he can read them. Aristotle's like, I kind of read Mandarin. I'm pretty good. So it's like a flashback with Batman on the... Like,
it's not a flashback. What happens is he thinks Batman is.
Well,
in the room
first it's a flashback.
Yeah, the first one is.
It's some implied
uranium theft.
He might have been in like a Brave and the Bold team up issue or something.
Yeah, and Batman in the past like meets him, and then he wakes up and he's like, okay, that's weird. I had dreamt about it. And then Batman shows up in his room. And he's like, you're such a dumbass. You think you could just run in and just fight people whenever you feel like it, you dumb piece of shit.
Yeah, he's like, what, you just do this to boost your career or to get, basically get your rocks off?
Yeah, you think this is a part-time job, you piece of shit?
You can't half do what you were doing. It's got to be full-time. Your need, your obsession, the engine that drives you. It's got to be who you are. Which, it's a bit funny biased. Taking advice from Batman, who has his own very severe problems.
Yeah, especially because not all heroes are like the way Batman is. He's saying this like, you have to be like me.
But isn't that what Batman would do? Isn't this what he does to every Robin? Like, I really like the way Batman shows up and just be like, you're not as good as Batman, fuck you.
But does he show up? Because Vic Sage is like delirious at this point, so he doesn't know if it was actually a dream or if he was just imagining Batman in the room.
Except then Tot starts talking to him and he's like, here's what he could have been telling you since you were thrown in the river and he contacted me to get to you. Yeah, but it's all hypothetical and it's like, come on.
Todd also always does that, where he's like, I'm just going to over-explain everything to annoy you.
But Todd, like, they were mid-conversation when Batman showed up, so like, I don't think, unless Todd's just bullshitting.
Todd does say, like, I dozed off, sorry.
No, I think what happened, from what I interpreted, like, it seemed like they were talking, but Vic Sage passed out, like, at some point, and then Todd went back to sleep, so it's not clear what exactly happened where...
Okay, you're right.
But that's what they're going for. Like, it's supposed to be like, is this happening? Is it Vic imagining it?
Yeah.
So Vic is really busted up. He has, like, broken legs and casts and stuff, and he's like, I'm gonna go on a trip. A helicopter shows up from Shiva and is like, hey, I gotta bring you somewhere. It brings him to a cabin in the woods with some guy named Richard. Question mark? Who is this guy?
He's like it's not really important who he is, but all he is like a crippled wheelchair guy. But he wasn't.
People are not defined.
He's a crippled wheelchair guy.
He's a guy in a wheelchair who was like a former master martial artist. He was a character in the comics, but I didn't know that when I read this first comic. I just thought he was just a interesting guy who even though he's in a wheelchair, he's very wise. He knows. He basically helps.
Even though Mr. Miyagi's.
Yeah,
but he really it's such a training montage from every movie where he's like, I'm gonna train your mind, like you have to learn the way of the warrior, and he's like, but you're in a wheelchair, and he's like, it's like a mindset thing, Vic. So he's like,
I really like the way that scene is portrayed, because at first he's like, oh, am I gonna learn martial arts from, and he stops and he goes, oh, from a cripple? Maybe that's the first lesson. Like,
yeah, that's good.
And also, as they're going through this montage, there's this theme going on because like when he was in the water, he was focused on time. The time he was in the water and stuff like that. And then as he's training, he says he realizes that time being an illusion is infinitely malleable. It can be stretched, contracted. And like he has these Zen thoughts and becomes more peaceful, talking about how he dreamed he was a butterfly and he woke up, he had a strange realization. He realized that when he woke the man who had the dream of a butterfly, he realized when he woke up, he didn't know whether he was a butterfly that was dreaming he was a man or was actually real.
A butterfly.
It's the famous Taoist saying.
So like as he's going through his training, his mind's becoming less like I'm gonna beat the shit out of him. I'm so fucking awesome. It's becoming more like hey,
less objectivist.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. He's going from Phil to Darryl.
Yeah. And then Shiva shows up, and she's like, "Hey, let's." Well, first Richard's like, "I don't think you're actually like." You're not a warrior. You're a curious guy.
Yeah, he said Shiva sent you here because she says you have a passion for combat. I think you just have a passion for curiosity.
And then Shiva just shows up out of the woods and is like, I think he's wrong. Let's fight and prove it. And they have a cool fight where he's like, I'm Zen now. And again, we have this whole time thing where he's like, he's able to see the strikes before they happen because he's realizing time is something that is not objective.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, well, I was right. You're a good warrior. And he's like, or maybe I'm just curious to what does he say?
He says maybe I'm just curious to see what will happen
if we mixed it up again.
And then he asks her why she saved him, but she just leaves, which is Shiva. Shiva's a very interesting character in the DC universe because she can kick anyone's asses. Like Batman is fucking scared of her. And
really? So she's like a cross. Okay.
Yeah, like what happened is that they actually have a story where she trains Batman, and she basically says, "Okay, I trained you, Batman. Now you have to kill this guy, or else I'm going to kill you." And like Batman's like, "What the fuck do I do?" Like Shiva, I can't. She's going to kill me. I can't fight her. And it's like, she's like, what character can do whatever the fuck she wants because she's such a great fighter, and she basically does stories like this where she fucks with people basically.
That's cool.
Yeah. She was awesome.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, time to go see the people who killed me. And he goes to the Reverend's, or the mayor's place, where the Reverend always is. And we get some flashback again from the Reverend saying, why do I do what I do? Why am I evil? Audience. And he's like saying, I realized in Vietnam that life is a nightmare that you can't wake up from.
Life is like a hurricane here in Duckville.
Okay. He's like, life is like a nightmare, and that since we're all stuck in this, all I can do is become basically, like Sly said before, I can be someone adding to this suffering until the corruption of the world is so great that the people, until God has no choice but to basically purge the world of its sin.
I knew my mission to hasten the corruption, to nurture the foulness until the Almighty has no choice but to rain down fire and brimstone.
So this is when we see the second half of his Vietnam flashback where he throws down the cross and picks up an AK-47 and kills everybody.
Yeah, he's like, I just start killing women and children, and like, eventually God's gonna have to end this shitty world. Which I thought was kind of a cool character. Like,
yeah, I think so.
Because at first you're like, he's just evil just for fun, but he's like, no, I'm gonna bring God's wrath on the world. And then the question starts walking in, singing Danny Boy, and he's like, what's going on? I must have the TV on. Where's it coming from? And then the question shows up and says, the Reverend gets to his knees and he's like, what do you want? And he says, I want you, Reverend. I want you to pray.
Yeah,
then it ends.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. So we're going to skip ahead to issue 8 from the same series now.
Yeah.
Just because it it does more of the objectivist stuff.
Yeah. Between here and issue 2 and 8, what happens is Vic Sage becomes like a newly formed protector of Hub City, but more of a liberal piece of shit. Like, he becomes the fucking scum that Mr. A hates. And speaking of Mr. A, we have this issue.
Yeah, and this issue is called Mikado. And it starts off with this guy hanging upside down over, like, this boiling cauldron.
Yeah, like
and
a witch's
he's just
cauldron.
begging for his life, and he's slowly dipped down into it as a guy in, like, this kind of Fu Manchu mask with a long mustache says, "My objective all sublime, I shall achieve in time to let the punishment fit the crime."
Yep.
And basically, it cuts across to different people that are being captured and punished by this guy.
In the way that they are being assholes in their lives.
Yeah, like this super fat obese dad that won't let his wife or children eat. And
I was like, what is this? Like, he's like as big as the Blob, and he's like eating food, and she's like, please, we're starving.
They're like emaciated, and they have,
and he's like, eat shit.
He throws food in the white mom's face, and he says, "They can eat that off your face. Fuck you."
I was like, what world is this guy in?
He says that he's punishing them because she went to a hospital last time he abused her.
No,
and he said, "This is
no, they were abused. I think the abuse was no food because the doctor said malnutrition."
Yeah, and also these kids are bastards. So and he's like, "I'm doing you a favor for even being your fucking husband and giving them a fucking name. So fuck you. I'll eat all the fucking food I want."
It's just such a it's like such sick people.
It is. That's what
this is. What Hub City is.
And then the way this guy gets punished is
Mikado captures him in the truck, and then he tranquilizes him so he's paralyzed. And then he takes him to an alley and then cuts off all of his fat.
All the meat off his bones.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The same way you saw him ripping the chicken off the bone, like it's like they have this really close up on it, and then that's what happens to him.
Yeah, so the other reason why I wanted this issue is it shows you how shitty Hub City is. A better idea of how.
I mean, something's wrong with like the water or the air. Like, these people are demented. Like, something is fucked up. There's a
Their
portal to
product
hell.
of their environment, Phil? No, it's that they did this to themselves.
I chose this.
Yeah, and so like one thing I like about they even have like a lore with how stupid Hub City is, where Mira, Vic Sage's love interest, and Vic, they while they're talking about how all the fucked up crimes going on. They start making jokes like,
and this is a recurring thing throughout the whole series.
Yeah, like what's a Hub Shitty straight? 5 unrelated cards and a switchblade. What happens when the hubby stops paying his garbage bill? They stop delivery, and
I love that joke.
Yeah, and my favorite is we hear about the hubby who tried to blow up the bus. He burned his lips on the gas pipe. So like a person in Hub City is considered like the dumbest human being in like entire DC universe.
They definitely have fucking lead in the water or something.
Yeah, probably.
That was good because I had no idea what a hubby was because I didn't know the city's name, and I was googling like slang. I'm like, what is a hubby?
Is that offensive derogatory term?
Thing.
So anyway, this is what most of the issue is. It's like it's these people being assholes, like sociopaths, and then this Japanese guy shows up and does that to them.
Yeah, he does his quotation as he murders them, which the question finds out from Tot is from Gilbert and Sullivan operetta.
The first suspect is a guy. The first suspect Vic chases down is a guy who's not unable to walk. So only leaves one final suspect, which is the doctor in the hospital in the slums where the crimes are taking place.
Yeah, so
it's like a mystery thing. They trace it back to the hospital. And they're like, well, everyone who comes in here, like they're related to having been to the ER.
Basically, like a person goes to the ER, and that person who caused that crime to that person gets fucked up later on.
Yeah. So like the guy that was being dipped in that cauldron, his son was burned badly in a bathtub like 2 weeks earlier. Yeah,
and so it turns out like Vic Sage says the guy who was the criminal could be a saint because the guy is such a immaculate like record of decency. He was a Vietnam War vet hero, and he basically went to work in the slums for 18 hours a day with barely any pay. And he assumes that the guy snapped.
Yep. So he breaks into his house to go see him. Vic Sage, I don't know why he does it. He's the one sitting in like the chair, like the mastermind villain, waiting for him to come in. And so he comes in, and this is a pretty good twist that the guy who's doing this, Mikado, he's actually a black doctor.
He was just wearing a Japanese mask.
He's just the fucking Asian face.
So then, because the question is a liberal, and he asks questions first and shoots later, he's asking him, it's like, I'm not a judge, though it may come to that if I decide to turn you in. I want to know why you did this. And so Mikado pours himself a drink, and then he pulls a gun out of a drawer and shoots the question in the neck and
with like a trank dart.
Yeah, he's actually his victims.
But what's great is I love that the question didn't even it pans. It shows the frame of Mikado pulling the gun out of the drawer, and Vic Sage is still sitting there with his fists under his chin, like, "Oh, tell me more."
It's like he couldn't have ever imagined this happening. Yeah. He's gonna fight me? He's just murdered a bunch of people.
But so that's the thing with the question is he's more curious than he is wants to do justice. That's kind of one of the themes is he wants to know more than he wants to stop it.
So
which I find really interesting.
He passes out, and Mikado explains he regrets. He doesn't pass out
fully. He's unable to move his body, but he's kind of out of it.
Oh yeah. So he says that he regrets what he has to do, but he's gonna have to kill him because he knows Mikado's identity.
And he says he's sorry for killing an innocent person, but the question says he's not innocent.
Yeah.
The question says he's not innocent. He beat his girlfriend as a teen. He beat up a professor at a school. He said he liked getting into fights that he knew he would win, but he's trying to change. And now he basically talks about the stuff he's done in the series so far, like save a bus full of children from a bomb. And he says, does he deserve to die like those other people? He's not innocent, but does he deserve to die too?
Yeah, he says, I don't do that stuff anymore, but I did, so I'm not an innocent person.
But is basically it's an argument and I feel like Vic is genuinely asking because he also questions these things about himself a lot, where he's like, do I deserve a second chance or should I be punished for what I've done?
Yeah.
This stops the doctor from he was about to stab him with this lethal injection basically. And he's
he turns it on himself instead after quoting
as he says the line.
Yeah. I was like, no, what? This guy, he's killing people for the things they did, and then he's like, am I innocent? Tell me. And he's like, shit, you're right.
But the thing is, the doctor's not innocent either.
I know, and that's why he's like, well, the punishment fits the crime. I'm going to euthanize myself.
But then the question goes in, washes his face, and when he comes back out, Mikado's gone.
Yeah, so he might not have killed himself after all. And
that's a weird twist, I feel like.
I actually...
It would be so fitting if he just died.
Yeah, me too. I think that was
I felt like that was one of those comic book twists where it's in case anyone wants to use him again.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point in the series, because the series went on for 60 issues...
38.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, 38.
I don't know why I thought it was 60.
Wow.
Oh, it's 6 trades, whatever. I feel like this early into the series, they weren't willing to make those, hard choices.
But this guy just showed up for this issue. It's okay.
No, but
I agree. There was a mistake in retrospect, but I can see why they didn't want to kill this new character off.
But I'm saying as the series goes on, they do start to make much more aggressive choices like that.
Yeah.
And this was one of the first. This was coming out at about the same. I mean, it was a couple years later, but this was when DC started doing mature books.
Yeah.
But why keep around a character who's a hardliner, eye for an eye, and he pussies out and does an eye for an eye himself?
Well, I don't think
because
that they had plans with
you can use him later.
Yeah, that's the only thought process. I do agree with Phil, but like Ryan said, as they went further into the series takes more and more bold risks as it goes on.
And I think they just weren't willing to take that chance yet. But I do agree it would have been the better choice.
Which is one of the things I don't like about comics.
Well, it does take these chances later, though.
But I mean, this still holds. They still didn't kill this guy right here.
Fair.
Yeah, well, anime has panty shots all the time. Does that make
and I don't like that about anime.
Yeah, but you get used to it. You're like, this is part of anime.
Well, I mean, you can still complain about that stuff.
That's true.
So what do you guys think about the question overall after these issues, and in comparison to Rorschach especially?
I like
it's hard to get a good estimate when we only spend 3 issues with them. One of which is the old question.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to read some more?
I would be okay with reading more.
I actually, when I was first reading this, I wasn't a huge fan. And then after I finished, I was like, it's pretty good. And then talking about it, I was like, this is better than I was initially thinking.
I think I wanted to bring this up, but I didn't know where to insert it or anything. But one of the worst parts about the question is at least when I was first reading it, and because I probably read that 60s issues, is there's just so many comic book heroes and origins and characters that are so similar that I'm like, what makes the question different? He just seemed the same as everyone else, where he's like, I'm a do-gooder that has a job, and I'm in my late 20s or early 30s, and I'm really good at martial arts even though there's no reason for me to be. And I go and stop gangsters, and everything ends out okay. And that's why I liked when we were reading the redo or whatever.
Yeah.
And this question, it started to get into more interesting topics that I wanted to see more
Yeah,
of.
I think the
Like,
Denny O'Neil
O'Neill's
one is way better.
O'Neill's a good writer. I do like his writing, and I would read it more because of him.
And I love comparing it to Alan Moore's complete opposite take, where he took Rorschach even further, the question even further, the objectives route, while Daniel O'Neil was like, I'm going to take him the super liberal route, like completely deconstruct him. I like
feel
that
like
comparison.
the question is a continuation of the original question, and A-Man is Rorschach is A-Man.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Mr. A.
Or the-
Asshole man. Mr.
I
Asshole.
do think Rorschach is an interesting character too, though. Like,
Yeah, he is.
I think both sides of that question are interesting. I think they're like it's an interesting way to explore it because, like, for all of the questioning, like, well, can people change? I don't want to ever judge people. Like, you do have some people who, like Angel in Mr. A, you're just like, fuck you. By giving these people a chance, you are letting other people suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
That's definitely a good moral quandary.
one of the big reasons why I was really excited to do this episode is because we talk so much about, like, why, especially on our other show, Oops, I Talk Politics, another plug, where we, like, talk about, like, why reinvent a character? Why not just make a new character? And the question's one of those examples where they did both very successfully. Like, they reinvented it, they reinvented him as Rorschach, and it was a big success, and then they reinvented him using his continuity and, like, his job and his role, and, like, built it into the character, and it also works really well. And I feel like it's such a good example of how, like, we could pick which one we prefer, but as long as the story's good, both work.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like the
I
opposite
agree.
of like the problem we usually have where we read like the bad example of one or the other where they make a new character or they continue a character where they shouldn't have. But this is an example of them one time they actually did it right both times.
Yeah, and I can't think of another example where it worked both ways as successfully. But, yeah, so that's the question.
Cool.
All right, so
What's the question? What was your question?
Who's on first?
So, you should check us out on everywhere. We have a Facebook group now.
We've had too many plugs. We hit the
No,
limit.
we're actually gonna do the real plugs now, the ones that matter.
the butt plugs.
Yeah, Screw Smoke Man.
So we folded in the Oops I Talk Politics Facebook group to be both. So now, if you want to talk about all sorts of stuff like existentialism and objectivism and all that jazz, come join us at Oops I Talk Divisive Issues on Facebook, and you should rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. And I don't mention this ever, you should tell a friend to listen to us, because I feel like that goes way farther than anything.
Yeah.
And that would be awesome. And
Word of mouth is how most things actually spread.
yeah, like herpes. And some people
Oh.
sorry, mouth, you know? So some people have been adding their friends to the Facebook group, and it's been awesome. And people seem to like our Flintstones episodes, so thanks everybody. And you should also check out the Comrade Radio Network and Facebook group. We're actually about to release our second volume. It's probably out by now, by the time this episode comes out, of the Spotify playlist. So you can find links to that on comraderadio.com or the Facebook group. So thank you guys for listening to Divisive Issues. Shit.
I've been shit.
No, I've been not a mere dispenser of entertainment, but a defender of truth and justice.
I've been the product of my environment.
I've been a butterfly dreaming he was a man.
And I've been herpes. Thanks, Ryan.
Stay in continuity.